The other plaintiffs, Barrios, Laguna, Torcada, and Malik, no longer wish to continue litigating this case. That's interesting. So why are other judges then certifying classes in various jurisdictions when many of those people may not want to challenge that?
When people go through the time, the money, and the horrors making the way to the United States border and then get here only to realize they're being sent back, that deters others from coming here in the future.
Kristi Noem says, suck it. She's responding to this notice of voluntary dismissal in the case where she was being sued by these people, Maiker Alejandro Espinosa Escalona. And this is, of course, is a deportation battle. And it's a nice celebration of victory from Kristi Noem because you don't often hear that in litigation. You often feel it. You want to say it, but you don't. And to hear the Department of Homeland Security Secretary rub their faces in it is quite enjoyable. Now, what is going on in this case? Let's go into the background here because what she's responding to, you'll notice it here, it says notice of voluntary dismissal. And it's kind of weird. You're like, wait a minute. Kristi Noem is being sued by Maiker Alejandro and they're going to just dismiss their case? Like they won, they don't care, they don't need it or something like that? No, not so fast. The reason they're dismissing this is because Kristi Noem and the DOJ obliterated them, right? She got sued here in this case in Judge Carl Nichols' courtroom in DC. He was a January 6th judge on many cases. And what Noem submitted is this motion to dismiss the case. So that motion hit 3 days later on the 22nd, they dismissed the case, okay? Voluntary dismissal. So what that means is they got crushed and they're going to cope their way out of it to say, no, we didn't lose. We just wanted to dismiss it anyways. But here's what happened, okay? Here is the filing from Kristi Noem in support of her motion to dismiss this case and why she's telling the other side to suck it because she just obliterated them. Here is the background from the DOJ on behalf of Kristi Noem. Says, all right, guess what, Judge Carl Nichols? We moved to dismiss this case because they sued us seeking a petition for a writ of habeas corpus. They did not want to be sent to Guantanamo Bay. Now, plaintiffs, the Alejandro and the illegals, they claim that their detention in Guantanamo would be inconsistent with Homeland's detention authority under the INA and that it would result in plaintiffs being subject to unconstitutional conditions of confinement, right? So it's a big Guantanamo case. Now, they assert these challenges under the APA through a writ of habeas corpus, Fifth Amendment due process clause, U.S. Code, and more. But this is ridiculous. This case should be dismissed. And the judge didn't dismiss this. They like, oh crap. It's like, yeah, okay. It's like that dog just rolls over on its belly. Like, okay, you're in charge. First, since the complaint was filed, 7 plaintiffs are not even in U.S. custody anymore, okay? Including one who was removed from the United States after a very brief stay at Guantanamo. And as a result, we don't have the possibility of being subject to challenge policies or procedures or conditions. And second, the plaintiffs who do continue to be detained in the United States lacked standing to challenge their detention in Guantanamo as they're only 2 of the tens of thousands of immigration detainees in custody, and they lack any reasonable basis to claim that they're an imminent risk of transfer to Guantanamo. And third, the INA, the Immigration and Nationality Act, precludes judicial review of the government's discretion to transfer an alien who's removed to the appropriate place of detention. And fourth, they also fail to state a claim under the APA, and we're going to win. At most, their claim sounds in habeas, but to the extent that any of these things survive, they should be dismissed, they should be severed into individual cases and transferred to their respective jurisdictions of confinement. But even if the court were to consider these claims, the secretary has total authority to detain these people and strong rationales for the decisions. None of this is arbitrary and capricious, and they have failed to show any due process violations. They have hypothetical claims of fear, blah, blah, blah. None of it is acceptable. This court should dismiss this case in its entirety. For the background, they tell us, of course, the executive branch has a lot of power under U.S. Code, 6 months periods where some things happen. But in this case, here's what happened. On January 29th, Trump issued a memo ordering Homeland and the DOD to take necessary steps to expand the Migrant Operations Center in Guantanamo. Beef that puppy up, because we're going to fill up those cells. The DOD acted swiftly to comply with the order. They created the Joint Task Force Southern Guard to work with Homeland to operationalize what needed to be done. The detainees are housed in 2 areas of the base, with the higher threat immigration detainees in Camp 6 and the lower threat detainees housed at the MOC. They get access to counsel. They can call families and friends friends, there's communal living, there's recreation time. It's like nice, it's fine. Under the rules of procedure though, they have to show that they're going to win or that this court even has jurisdiction. They haven't done that here. They say 7 plaintiffs here who were transferred to Guantanamo departed the following night to his country of removal, and they're no longer in custody. They're gone. Afuera. Bye. And because these individuals have been removed, the court should dismiss this action. They're gone. To present a live case or controversy to avoid dismissal on mootness, there got to be a personal stake here. But here, simply put, the claims are moot. They're no longer in custody. They're not even in Guantanamo anymore. Saying the relief that they sought is generally to stop us from transferring them, and they want us to order the return of them to come back, right? Like bring these people back. No, they're gone. Now that they've been removed, they're not in our custody. They have no injury that can be remedied, so you can't sue us. Nor can they maintain lawsuit under the collateral consequences doctrine. Under this doctrine, where a former detainee has been removed, they must make an actual showing that there were injuries. Something else happened that was problematic. But here, their claims are moot. And also, the people who are currently detained also lack standing. This person called Hiran and this other person called Josu de Jesus Torcate Cebrian, they're currently detained in Arizona and Texas, but they lack standing to bring this lawsuit. It's limited to cases and controversies, and that's not what's happening here. There's no standing here. And the remaining plaintiffs say that there are 2 primary reasons for standing, but neither of those are sufficient. They're unable to point to anything in the government's plans saying that we're going to ship them to Guantanamo. They're just projecting. They're just saying, well, since we sent other people there, that they're going to go there, but that's not our plan. They don't know anything about that. We've sent people to many places, even to Venezuela. So in the end, they don't know that there is any actual harm that's going to befall them. They're just kind of making it up. They can't do that. Doesn't meet the standard. And so there is no standing here. Now they say this court lacks jurisdiction to review any of this. And again, this doesn't even get to the judge because they turn around and voluntarily dismiss it. They also have no basis under the APA. We've talked about that sequence of claims a lot. And there is discretion under the agency. Okay, so big filing by Kristi Noem saying, I have the authority to transfer these people. Their claims fail. The secretary under the law has the authority to do these things. And she did it. So it affords the secretary extraterritorial authority, and Kristi Noem has a ton of power. So they detail that for us. There is no due process claim. And in conclusion, dismiss this action, right? From Jason Zabuda. Very, very robust filing, lots of details saying everybody's going to get everything they need. Stop your crying. You're living in communal living. You got daily recreation, 3 daily meals, access to medical care. Immigration detainees have access to counsel. They get unmonitored calls with their lawyers. They call family and friends. They are subject to searches and behavior correction, but there's no other unconstitutional conditions to say like this is cruel and unusual or violating their rights. So there's no standing to challenge these cases at all. Signed by Jason Zabuda, sent in to Judge Carl Nichols. And here is what the others have responded with, right? So this is what Kristi Noem was responding to. This caused Kristi Noem to say, suck it, because they're voluntarily dismissing their case. So they filed this one from all these attorneys from the ACLU loses legal rent. They all voluntarily dismiss this one. Says, pursuant to the rules, all these plaintiffs, Maiker, Escalona, it's interesting. They're not using their pseudonyms in these, right? Yeah. In the other ones where they're certified as class gangbangers, they're all hiding their names, but this one, they're not going to do that. They all submit voluntary dismissal of all claims without prejudice in this case. Here's why. Since the filing defendants, Trump and Noem, have removed these people, Espinoza, Wilhelm, Castillo, Polito, Estever, Muhammad, Rayhan from the U.S. So their claims are now moot. The other plaintiffs, Barrios, Laguna, Torcata, and Malik, no longer wish to continue litigating this case. That's interesting. So the ACLU was representing class members or representing some people as part of a group who don't want to be a part of the group. Interesting. So why are other judges then certifying classes in various jurisdictions when many of those people may not want to challenge that? They're in federal detention. You can imagine if you're in federal detention, if you're being held, you're just like, just let me out. Laguna, Torcata, Serbian, and Malik, like they're sitting in custody. If you fight this, you're going to sit in custody. If you don't fight it, you're going to be deported. You go back home. You want to sit in jail, or do you want to go back to Venezuela and be released and figure it out? Obviously, it's going to be the latter. So this is why the ACLU is trying to do things this way, right? Certify a class, make it much broader so that people who are not in custody are also included in the claims. But here, they don't want to continue to litigate this. They're gone. Now, they say Trump has not filed an answer or a motion for summary judgment. Therefore, we hereby voluntarily dismiss this action without prejudice. Man, that's a loss for them. They must be so sad about this because these illegals are obviously not going to be back in America. So Kristi Noem celebrating, suck it, ACLU. You lose. Voluntary dismissal, and it's voluntary. It's like, well, almost hints that they're knowing that they're going to lose. They'd rather not lose on the merits. They'll just voluntarily dismiss it so that they can take these claims and not have a bad finding on the record, right? Is what they're doing. Very sneaky. Lee Glorant and the rest of them, terrible lawyers from the ACLU, and they lost that one. Now, somebody who is in Texas is, of course, the governor, Greg Abbott, joined on Fox to talk about how secure the border is now that Trump has been in charge over these last months.
I've never seen such a massive drop in illegal immigration ever. You know, I think President Trump had the best line. He said that to secure the border, to change the system, we didn't need new laws. We just needed a new president.
Right.
And once he got elected president, it led to a sudden halt in people crossing the border illegally. The downturn has been so dramatic. We're just seeing a trickle of people a day. You're showing those films. Those films are under the Biden administration. There's just a trickle of people a day, and I am told that of the people who do make it across, most of them are actually returned. There's only been a few dozen or so that are even allowed to stay in the United States, and that leads to exactly what Secretary Noem was talking about, and that is when people go through the time, the money, and the horrors making the way to the United States border and then get here only to realize they're being sent back, that deters others from coming here in the future.
It has been massive, and it's interesting because guys like Senator Langford said we needed more laws to get that done, but the border is now secure, and hopefully it continues to go that way. Here's Representative Tenney saying the big, beautiful bill will help solve that.
And we have invested in border security. We had 4 years of an open border and dangerous criminals coming into our country, gang members, as we know. And that money, we need the money and the security to make our border secure again. And, you know, we have Tom Homan, who, by the way, hails from my district. He's actually from New York 24, who's done an amazing job really trying to create law and order, to protect our sovereignty, our borders, and create and protect American businesses. I mean, you can't function. I'm a small business owner from upstate New York. If you don't have law and order in your society and you don't have the freedom to do that job, with the influence of gangs and illegals and also the economic pressure that it puts on states.
We need secure borders. We elected somebody to bring in secure borders, and we're getting them. And judges all across our country, ACLU gangbang lawyers, Democratic operatives, billions of dollars that had been flowing into their entities to create this problem are now all reacting like the hydrogen peroxide on a wound. There's this antibody reaction from the left now that their corruption is being rooted out, and we're happy to see Kristi Noem celebrating a nice victory because the ACLU can suck it.